Alright, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Tales and Tunes. The rugby season is finished. Let me start off by that news. We unfortunately lost the quarterfinals of the league last Sunday. So that's the way it is. The season is finished. We got a few more games coming up with the national team, up with Burgos. At the moment, it is done. It's been a hell of a ride. And let's see what next season will bring us. In amidst of all the chaos and the end of season asados and all that type of stuff, I have rehearsed a French song by the man who's originally named Jean-Philippe Smet, but who's known to the people as Johnny Hallyday. Johnny Hallyday is the most successful French artist, I would say. Maybe Charles Aznavour is more internationally known, but who would, it's basically like having to choose between the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Everyone's going to have their own personal preference. Over 110 million records sold, more than 3,500 shows. Man, when I went through this list, it's like, this guy is just insane. He is, weirdly enough, not so very well known in Anglo-Saxon countries, English-speaking countries. So he's actually talked about as the most successful rock and roll artist you've never heard of, because outside of France and Belgium, a little bit, in Holland a little bit, because French music sometimes tend to drip in from time to time. But people just haven't heard of him, and it's crazy because you can't get any bigger than him in France, basically. So yeah, I'm gonna play a song by him called "Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi," and that means don't play your rock and roll music for me anymore. I got to know this song through a good friend of mine, Corey Poway, who I used to play with in Bourges, just below Paris. And so that's how I got to know the song. Him singing along to it in the bus to and actually from games. So I just thought it was his original song. Sounds great. It turns out it is a cover of a band called the Smokies. And the song is called, guess what? Don't play your rock and roll no more. So you live and you learn, don't you, fellas, when doing your deep, intensive research for these Tales and Tunes episodes. I do still like the Johnny Hallyday version more, though, because now when I hear the English version, it just sounds weird, but Johnny, his voice is insanely good. He can sing soft and high, but he can also sing... he has such a raw voice, man. Incredible. So, born in 1943, he, Jean-Philippe Smet, Belgian heritage. What the hell? No one expected that in the Tales and Tunes office during this research. He's a freaking Belgian. But then he had both nationalities, chose French, got taken in as one of his own. But then later on in his life, actually, towards the end of his life, he was looking into changing his nationality back to Belgium. But then rumor has it that tax-wise, that wasn't necessarily an intelligent thing to do, so he kept from it. Johnny Hallyday, so had a fairly far from ideal childhood. His dad was a nightclub performer, but he kind of chose to go away. He basically got brought up by his aunt, and now he got influenced by, and this is why I like it already, people, Elvis Presley and the rock and roll wave. So that's how Johnny decided to be a musician, a rock and roll artist. He chose his name, and this is quite funny. His cousin-in-law was from the USA, and he couldn't pronounce Jean-Philippe too well. So it was like, Jean-Philippe. You know what? I'm going to call you Johnny. You know what, old pal? I'm going to call you Johnny, however these Americans talk back in the day. And that's how I got the Johnny part. The Hallyday part, now, there were two conflicting stories here in the in the offices of Tales and Tunes during research. Because one, on Wikipedia, it said that Hallyday was just the name of his... he got that through his cousin-in-law and blah, blah, blah. But I've seen an interview with Johnny Hallyday where he said that there was a Dr. Hallyday that actually saved his father from a heart attack. And so this, that he actually chose Hallyday as a good fortune name, basically, you know? Now, I like the second story better, but, you know, we're here at Tales and Tunes to tell you the facts and nothing only, no matter how much it can break your romantic vision of reality. But we'll just keep it on the second story. Anyway, Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. It's a really... If you don't pay attention to it, it actually has the same beginning as one of the Wham songs, like... Well, I guess it could be nice if I could rock your body. I know that everybody has a body like you. It's not that song, no, so don't be confused. We're still playing Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. I couldn't really find any explanation about the lyrics, but it says nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Je suis plus dur que tu ne crois. Ne te sers pas le souvenir. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. We have nothing more to say, but I'm stronger than you think. Memories have nothing to do with it anymore, and don't play your rock and roll music for me anymore. So yeah, even though we don't have an explanation of the lyrics, it doesn't sound like Johnny is giving away any second chances quite yet. So yeah, and the song kind of goes along talking about revenge and bitterness and jealousy and all that type of stuff. So I don't know what it's about, but let's just say he broke away from a terrible relationship and finally, and the girl, his ex, now wants to come back to him. Nah, none of that. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Having said that, people, let's get straight into it. Let's see if my French pronunciation is still as good as I thought it was a couple of years ago. And without any further ado, Johnny Hallyday, originally the Smokies, Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Je suis plus dur que tu ne crois. Ne te sers pas souvenir. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Oh, joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Oh, je fais ce qu'un homme devait faire pour mériter ce nom. Mais la doute et la folie marchaient à tes côtés. Tu oses parler de ton retour et de nos souvenirs avec une voix qui grince comme en 45 tous et chaque mot a dû sur le bas du sourire. Oh, nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Je suis plus dur que tu ne crois. Ne te sers pas à souvenir. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Oh, joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll. joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Je crois que tu devais faire pendant très longtemps, avec le sourire de l'Aveyron sur le lèvres, les bras croisés sur le cœur qui battent sous son sang, avec le jeu vers l'horizon, toutes sortes de rêves. Oh yeah. Nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Je suis plus dur que tu ne crois. Ne te sers pas de souvenirs. Oh. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Oh, joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. One more time. Nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Oh, joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi. Holy moly. The French was alright. It doesn't matter. You guys don't understand. Hopefully, the French people, I'm sorry for messing up. The English people, what mess up? You don't know what I'm talking about. Johnny Hallyday, they call him the French Elvis. He was the one, supposedly, who brought rock and roll to France. He has his idol, Elvis Presley, so he's already a good guy for me. One of the biggest artists in the world that is not that popular outside of the French people. Johnny Hallyday, joue pas le rock and roll. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. As always, I'm your host, David Wiersma, and see you next time. Nous n'avons plus rien à nous dire. Oh, joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll. Joue pas le rock and roll pour moi.